Happy day everybody, my name is Jeremy and this is Barbecue Elementary. Today I'm making Jalapeno Peach Pork Belly Burnt Ends and a Jalapeno Peach Bourbon Smash. Let's go. I started out with the customary apron adornment, only to remember something horrible from last week.
What an idiot! Oh, what a loser!
A week-old stripe of buffalo sauce is not the biggest problem. Nonetheless, I decided to keep it casual. The idea for this week was to workshop a new glaze and then try to interpret it into some sort of new cocktail. And honestly, I was excited about the result. So first up, let's get this pork belly prepped for the smoker. I've got about 3 pounds here and we're cutting it into bite-sized cubes about 1.5 inches each. I typically do prefer the larger packs of whole pork belly from Costco because I can get the exact size pieces I want. With these strips, it's sometimes hard to get consistent sized cubes, so I kind of just did my best to make sure that there was a balanced amount of fat and meat on each cube, even though the sizes were a little all over the place. It's really not that big of a deal, except that you may sometimes have to wait a little longer for the bigger pieces to render. For my rub, I went with Heath Ryle's Barbecue Competition Rub, but you can really use whatever you'd like.
Bad idea.
I just wouldn't advise you to start out trying to apply the rub one side at a time.
Good idea.
Instead, grab yourself literally any vessel you might have lying around and mix it all in that way. I promise it will save you time and your sanity not having to flip each piece over 1,000 times trying to make sure everything is equally seasoned. And once that was out of the way, I placed everything back on the wire rack in an orderly fashion to rest and absorb the rub. I gave these about 20 to 30 minutes to do just that while I decided to make a huge mess out back by the grills. Okay, maybe not that big of a mess, but I'll just say leaf blowing ashes out of my shoes wasn't really on my list of stuff I had to do this week. With the mess picked up, I set up my Weber kettle for a medium length smoke by filling half of my slow and sear with unlit coals and putting about 2 handfuls of charcoal in my chimney, something you've seen me do in previous videos. I should also mention those are apple chunks I added for extra smoke. Now that the coals are heating up, it's time for the waiting drink of the week. It's the new part of the show where I pick out a drink and, well, wait.
There was a firefight!
Once the waiting drink had disappeared somehow, I poured the charcoal into the kettle and set it up to smoke at 250 degrees. While I let that come up to temp, I made a squirt bottle of some good stuff to help keep the meat moist as well as add a little bit of flavor. Today I used equal parts jalapeno juice, white vinegar, and water. When the smoker came up to temp, I decided to add in a water pan thanks to some good recommendations from Reddit, and I put the meat on the Barbie. After an hour of running perfectly at 250, I opened up the lid to add a little juice. While I let those continue to smoke, I decided to make the Jalapeno Peach Bourbon Glaze. I started out by mincing an entire jalapeno. I probably could have done 2, but wanted to start on the safe side. I then melted about a tablespoon of butter so that I could saute these jalapenos until soft. After softened, I used half a cup of peach preserves, 1/4 cup of Old Grandad 114, 1 tablespoon of honey, 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard, and stirred it all in. I then added about 2 teaspoons of garlic and simmered until semi-thickened. After the pork had been cooking for about 3 hours and the belly had reached an internal of about 160 degrees, it was time to apply the glaze and wrap them up. All I really had to do during this step was place them into a foil pan. I then made sure the glaze was thoroughly mixed in before covering them up with foil and placing them back on the smoker. I always factor in about an extra hour or so for this step, or until they reach an internal temp between 200 and 204 degrees. After the little piggies had been put to bed for that hour, it was time to work on my cocktail. I call it a Jalapeno Peach Bourbon Smash, and to start, we muddle 3 thin jalapeno slices and a peach slice together in a shaker tin. I then freshly squeezed and added 3/4 ounces of lemon juice, then 1/2 ounce of a 1-to-1 honey syrup. I then added 2 ounces of this Old Grandad 114, but you could really use any high proof bourbon of your choice. But for the price point, this is actually an amazing mixer. You'll then want to give it a hearty shake, and then you'll want to double strain it into a rocks glass with a large ice cube. You could certainly drink it just like that, but I topped mine off with a little bit of ginger beer for a little extra spice and to tie into the ginger that I added in my glaze. Then garnish with a peach slice or jalapeno wheel. Once the pork belly had reached internal temperatures around 200 degrees, I pulled the foil off and let the glaze tack up for another 15 minutes. After that extra 15 minutes, the glaze was fairly well set up and sticky, and they were ready to serve. I took a little time to plate them up, and I was ready to dig in. Alright, moment of truth. These Jalapeno Peach Burnt Ends were sticky, smoky, and absolutely ridiculous. The peach and bourbon glaze could have caramelized a little bit better, but they did have an amazing sweet heat, and overall they were really delicious. And the Jalapeno Peach Bourbon Smash was smooth, refreshing, with just enough kick to keep things interesting. Definitely recipes I will have to try again. And as always, thanks a million for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't, to follow me along on my adventures through Barbecue Elementary.